The TikTok police captain with millions of followers thought she was just making another video that night. She stopped the black man, made false accusations, and put him in handcuffs. But there was something she didn't know. The calm, quiet man she had just arrested was actually an FBI agent who had been watching her for months and was recording everything. Welcome to Stories of Black Lives. Before we dive into these powerful stories about respect, justice, and hope, please let us know in the comments which country you're watching from today. If you want to see more stories like this, please hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to like this video. Captain Victoria Rensfield thought she could manipulate the truth and humiliate another innocent black man for social media fame, until she found out he was a federal agent sent to investigate her. Damon Blackridge hadn't planned to stay in Millbrook Valley, Tennessee. It was supposed to be a short assignment, another small dot on a long map of quiet towns where loud things happened behind closed doors. But from the moment he stepped off Highway 31 and rolled into town in his beat-up silver Honda Civic, he knew this place was different. Not because it was worse than other towns he'd seen, though that would come later, but because of how normal everything looked. You wouldn't expect trouble here. A main street lined with American flags and church signs, family-owned hardware stores, and a local diner that still made peach cobbler from scratch. People nodded when they passed you on the sidewalk. Kids rode bikes without helmets. There was even a local car wash fundraiser every other Saturday in the church parking lot. To the people of Millbrook Valley, Damon was just another face, black, yes, and new in town, but polite, clean-cut, and quiet. He rented a modest one-bedroom apartment just outside city limits, picked up groceries at the Food Lion, and paid in cash. No criminal record, no local ties, and no online presence beyond a basic LinkedIn page. He told the landlord he worked in security consulting, and that was the end of it. Every night around 7, his neighbors would see him leave in his car. They assumed he worked a late shift somewhere. In a way, he did. But he wasn't going to a warehouse or a night desk job. He was watching and listening. What the town didn't know, what not even the police knew, was that Damon was deep undercover, an FBI agent assigned to monitor reports of discriminatory policing and potential civil rights violations in rural jurisdictions. For nearly 2 years, he bounced between small towns in Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, and now Tennessee. Quiet places where people looked the other way or shrugged things off as just how it is around here. But Damon had heard enough stories to know that how it is didn't mean it was right. His job was to blend in, observe, document, and when necessary, intervene. But only when the damage could be contained and the evidence was strong enough to hold up in court. You only get one chance to expose a department from the inside. One misstep and the whole operation falls apart. And Millbrook Valley had already given him enough red flags to know he was in the right place. It started with the traffic stops, always the same profile. Young black men, out-of-county plates, pulled over for weaving, dark tint, or suspicious behavior. Rarely any tickets, never any official reports. Just a quiet intimidation game played on the side of the road with a badge and a flashlight. Damon had been tracking it all, logging patrol patterns, matching badge numbers to body cam uploads, even cross-referencing timestamps on social media posts. And there was one name that kept coming up over and over again: Captain Victoria Rensfield. She wasn't just the face of the department, she was its brand. At 38, she'd become a local celebrity, known more for her viral TikTok clips than for her actual police work. Her videos had catchy music, dramatic edits, and millions of views. She framed herself as tough but fair, claiming she was rebuilding trust between cops and the community. But Damon could see right through it. The stories she told didn't match the reports. The people she arrested didn't match the charges. And the ones she embarrassed online, they never filed complaints. Because in Millbrook Valley, you don't speak out against the police. You just move on, if you're lucky. Damon didn't speak out either, not yet. His job wasn't to react, it was to watch and wait. So he kept his head down. He walked the long aisles of the local Walmart on Sundays like everyone else. He went to barbershops and let old men talk around him. He memorized street names and noticed which businesses stayed open late and which ones locked up early depending on who was hanging around. He waited. And then one night, without warning, Captain Victoria Rensfield made her move. She didn't know who he was. To her, He was just another black man walking out of a gas station at the wrong time. She wanted content, something dramatic, something that would get likes, clicks, and praise from people who thought they knew what real policing looked like. Captain Victoria Rensfield had built her reputation one edited clip at a time. At first glance, she was everything a small-town police department could hope for in a public-facing officer. Sharp uniform, sharp tongue, and the kind of confident walk that made people pause when she entered a room. But behind the scenes, Victoria wasn't chasing justice. She was chasing engagement. Victoria's rise in the Millbrook Valley Police Department came at the same time she was rising online. After one of her patrol videos, where she calmly de-escalated a tense domestic dispute, racked up 2.8 million views, something clicked. It wasn't about the work anymore. It was about the numbers. She leaned into the role, started calling herself Cap in videos, wore her badge a little higher on her chest, bought a dash-mounted GoPro for dramatic angles. She even hired a freelance video editor from Nashville to clean up her content before uploading it. Fast cuts, a little music, a well-timed caption like, "This is why I wear the badge." Her followers loved it. Local moms shared her videos in neighborhood Facebook groups. Young conservatives praised her no-nonsense approach. She started doing interviews, podcasts, even a short-lived live stream called Ride with Rensfield, where she answered questions between calls. But the truth was, her department was understaffed, undertrained, and barely holding things together. Morale was low. Officers rotated out faster than new hires could be processed. But none of that mattered as long as Victoria kept the town looking good online. She'd made herself the brand. But to some of her colleagues, especially those who'd been around longer, she was becoming a problem. She picked flashy calls. She didn't write reports unless she could use the footage later. And more than once, her arrests raised eyebrows, especially when her edited videos didn't match the uncut body cam recordings stored in evidence. Still, she had the public on her side. And in a town like Millbrook Valley, where perception was everything, that was enough. Then came the late October patrol. It was a slow Thursday night, nothing unusual. Victoria was driving solo, live on her secondary Instagram account, responding to a few comments and talking about how the streets don't sleep, when she pulled into the quick-stop gas station off Highway 31. That's when she saw him, Damon. He'd just finished paying inside and was walking back to his car, hoodie up, hands in his pockets, calm, minding his business. To Victoria, that didn't matter. She paused the live stream, killed the engine. Her GoPro was already rolling. She told herself it wasn't about race. She told herself it was about instincts, suspicion, gut feeling, all the usual justifications. But deep down, she was already scripting the voiceover in her head. This guy looked like he was up to something. You'll see why in a second. She approached Damon's car with a flashlight and a fake smile, claimed he didn't use his turn signal, asked what he was doing out so late, requested ID, told him to step out. He complied, calm, respectful, no raised voice, no attitude. Just questions. Am I being detained, officer? Can you tell me the reason for the stop? Victoria started getting irritated. He wasn't giving her conflict, no outbursts, no threats. Just cold, quiet control, the kind that didn't fit her usual video narrative. So she escalated. She claimed she smelled marijuana. There was nothing. She claimed she saw a bulge in his jacket. There wasn't one. And then she went for the big move, ordered a search of the vehicle. Damon didn't resist. He nodded. Go ahead, he said. She looked confused for a moment, then popped the trunk like she owned it. No drugs, no weapons, not even a traffic violation. Just a man with a clean record and a calm tone. But Victoria had the footage. She figured she could cut it up later, add a few voiceovers, maybe a stay alert caption, keep the followers happy. What she didn't know, what never crossed her mind, was that the man she just tried to humiliate was recording too. Damon didn't flinch as the patrol car's lights lit up behind him in the quick-stop parking lot. He took a slow breath and slid his license and registration onto the dashboard before Victoria even stepped out of her cruiser. He knew this moment was coming. Not if, when. Victoria approached with that performative energy he'd already seen in half a dozen of her viral clips. Left hand on her belt, right hand gripping a flashlight, chin slightly raised like she was already speaking to an imaginary camera. She tapped the back of his car, and circled to the driver's side. "You in a hurry tonight, sir?" "No, ma'am." "You know why I pulled you over?" "No, ma'am. I just got gas." "You didn't signal when pulling into the lot." Damon didn't argue, didn't smile, didn't offer extra words. She wasn't looking for cooperation. She was looking for material. "You from around here?" He nodded. "Just moved in last month, over near Elm Street." She studied him. Something in her expression flickered. A pause, like she was trying to place him but couldn't. "Got ID on you." "It's on the dash." She grabbed it and stepped back, but instead of going to her cruiser, she lingered, looked at the back seat, shined her light around, then leaned in again. "Mind stepping out for a second?" Damon stepped out calmly, slowly, hands where she could see them. The whole interaction was being recorded, not just by her GoPro, but by his device as well. A high-end pinhole lens built into the collar of his jacket, audio synced in real time to an encrypted server. This wasn't just field observation anymore. It was evidence gathering. "Just want to make sure everything's clear," Victoria said, already moving toward the passenger side. "You're searching the vehicle?" "I've got reasonable suspicion." "You smell marijuana?" She hesitated just long enough to reveal she hadn't prepared that excuse. "I saw something in your jacket. Could be a weapon." He opened the jacket slowly. "Empty pockets." "You're free to look," he said, stepping aside. She popped the trunk. Inside, a gym bag with workout clothes, a small first aid kit, a flashlight, and a clipboard with blank forms. No drugs, no weapon, no probable cause. She looked irritated. He looked patient. It was a standoff, but not the kind she'd expected. "Okay," she muttered. "You're good to go." Damon raised an eyebrow. "Do I get a citation?" "No, just a warning." "For what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she walked back to her car, leaving him standing beside his open trunk, waiting, still as a stone. That night, Victoria uploaded a short 24-second clip to her TikTok account. It showed Damon getting out of the car, edited just right to suggest tension. She added the caption, "Late night stop. Always trust your gut. Stay safe out there." It racked up 45,000 views in the first hour. But she made a critical mistake. She left in 3 seconds of background audio that her editor didn't catch. In it, you could hear Damon clearly saying, "You're searching the vehicle without a warrant." It was enough. Enough for analysts at the Bureau to confirm what Damon had been reporting for months: fabricated stops, unlawful searches, and selective targeting based on race. Victoria wasn't just a problem. She was a liability with a badge and a ring light. That night, Damon submitted his full field report, footage, timeline, GPS logs, the works. He titled it, Subject 009, Livestream Misconduct, Millbrook Valley PD. At Quantico, red flags were triggered, lawyers were looped in, a supervisor made the call. The investigation would accelerate. No more observation. It was time to act. But back in Millbrook Valley, Victoria still had no idea. To her, it was just another win, another reminder that she was the face of real policing. She told herself she'd handled it well, kept control, stayed composed, didn't escalate. She had no idea that by sunrise the next morning, her world was about to collapse. By sunrise the next morning, Captain Victoria Rinsfield's viral clip had crossed 120,000 views. The comments were full of praise. "Another thug off the street. This is what policing should look like. She's a hero. Every town needs a Rinsfield." She soaked it in, sat at her desk with her phone propped up against her coffee cup, scrolling through the engagement like it was a badge of honor. She didn't notice, or didn't care, that a few commenters were starting to ask questions. Wait, what did he even do? Didn't hear anything about a warrant. Is there a full version of this? She ignored them, always did. The algorithm didn't care about context, and neither did her audience. She'd learned early on that control of the narrative mattered more than accuracy. Clip the right 20 seconds, and people would believe anything. But that morning, something was different. At 9:15 a.m., her lieutenant walked into her office with a tight look on his face. He closed the door behind him. "We got a call," he said. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "Internal affairs. Something came through state channels. Anonymous complaint about your video from last night." She scoffed. "You're kidding." "Nope. They're requesting the full body cam audio and everything. And they want your incident report by today." She paused, Thought fast. There was no incident, no citation. Just a warning. They're saying you conducted a search. I had reasonable suspicion. He studied her. Well, you'll need to put that in writing. Victoria leaned back in her chair. She didn't like being questioned, especially not by her own team. She ran this department, unofficially, if not by title, and she had never been challenged over a simple traffic stop. She thought back to the encounter. That man, Damon, something about him didn't sit right. He wasn't scared, he wasn't defensive. He was still focused, like someone taking notes in his head, like someone who expected to be wronged but wasn't surprised. She shrugged it off. Fine, she said. I'll get the report done. But even as she said it, a twinge of unease crept in. That stop hadn't gone the way she wanted. No drama, no confrontation. Just a man who gave her nothing to work with. Still, it was too late now. The video was out, the narrative had been shaped, and in her world, that was all that mattered. Until her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't from TikTok. It was a text from a number she didn't recognize. Just one sentence. You're not the only one with a camera. Victoria stared at it. No name, no emoji, no context. Her first instinct was to dismiss it as a troll. She got those sometimes. Jealous nobodies, keyboard warriors. But something about this message felt different. Direct. Cold. She didn't reply. Instead, she pulled up the video on her feed and watched it again. 24 seconds. At first, it looked clean. But then there it was, 3 seconds of audio at the 0:16 mark. You're searching the vehicle without a warrant. And then her voice. I've got reasonable suspicion. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't meant to include that part. It was too specific, too real. She'd told her editor to cut anything procedural, keep it sharp, emotional. But apparently, he'd missed it. She called him, no answer. Left a voicemail. Delete the clip, all platforms, now. But it was already too late. Within an hour, the video had been downloaded, reposted, and broken down frame by a civil rights lawyer on Twitter. He called it a textbook case of Fourth Amendment violation. The thread was gaining traction fast. National accounts had started retweeting it. By noon, her inbox was full. Her lieutenant came back. Just got off the phone with someone from the DOJ. They want to talk. Something about prior complaints. They mentioned Damon Blackridge. Damon didn't smile when the report pinged through. It was a quiet acknowledgement, not a victory lap. The data package he received from Quantico confirmed what he already suspected. His encounter with Captain Victoria Rensfield had triggered a federal alert. Internal Affairs had flagged her body cam footage, cross-referenced her stop history, and noted a troubling pattern. The Bureau's Civil Rights Division had been circling Millbrook Valley for months. Damon's evidence just kicked the door open. At his modest apartment on the edge of town, he pulled a hard case from beneath the floorboards. Inside were 3 encrypted drives, a backup recorder, and a secured laptop linked to the Bureau's field portal. He opened the most recent file, Subject 009. The folder now had a red banner at the top, Priority Status Updated. Immediate field support pending. Translation, HQ was no longer watching. They were moving in. Damon had been working solo for nearly 8 months in Tennessee. Before Millbrook Valley, he'd embedded in Hamilton County, where a sheriff's deputy was caught using seized vehicles for personal errands. That case led to 2 quiet terminations and a department-wide retraining initiative. But this was different. Victoria Rensfield wasn't just misusing authority. She was weaponizing visibility. Her videos weren't just tone-deaf or poorly timed. They were edited tools of narrative manipulation. The people she targeted, all carefully chosen, all black, all male, none of them had criminal records when she stopped them. And that wasn't the worst part. The Bureau had been piecing together body cam data and social posts from her last 20 months. In at least 8 cases, her reports didn't match what the footage showed. Minor charges filed, then dropped. Evidence collected with no probable cause. In one case, a 20-year-old college student was searched at gunpoint for appearing nervous. No weapon, no drugs, just a hoodie and a cracked phone screen. The student never filed a complaint. He didn't know how. He didn't think it would matter. Damon had found his name in a data dump and tracked him down. He'd asked, "Why didn't you speak up?" The kid had answered, "Speak up to who? The whole town follows her on TikTok." That's when Damon understood the deeper problem. This wasn't just about bad stops or bad policy. It was about fear and silence. People too scared to speak because the person doing the harm had already shaped the story before they could. And now that same officer had turned her camera on him. He pulled up the footage she'd posted. He watched it again. This time pausing at each moment, she altered the narrative through editing. 1 second trimmed here to cut his question. A filter applied to boost contrast, making the scene appear darker, more hostile. Her voice slowed slightly, just enough to sound more composed, more in control. It was subtle. It was calculated. But she didn't know he had the raw version. Damon's lapel camera had caught it all, unaltered, time-stamped, uncut. It also had synced GPS data, matching precisely with dispatch logs and her cruiser's route. He packaged the evidence into a new file. Video discrepancy, intentional misrepresentation, suspected. He uploaded it. Then he waited. 2 hours later, a secure message blinked across his screen. Field supervisor en route. Code gray. Briefing initiated. He exhaled slowly. They were coming. The Bureau rarely escalated to a code gray. It meant they believed an officer's actions posed ongoing harm to civilians, and that intervention was necessary before public trust was completely destroyed. It also meant Damon was no longer just an observer. He would now act as a key witness and, if needed, an undercover handler during the takedown. He opened a second file labeled Victoria Rensfield, Public Escalation Timeline. The next move was hers. She just didn't know that every step she took from now on was being recorded twice. By Friday afternoon, the pressure was no longer subtle. Captain Victoria Rensfield stood in front of her mirror at the station, applying a bit of powder beneath her eyes. She'd barely slept, but her face had to look fresh. The camera didn't forgive fatigue. It was Community Outreach Day. She was scheduled to give a speech at Millbrook Elementary about staying strong and making good choices. She knew what people expected. The firm, fearless woman in uniform who kept the streets clean and looked good doing it. Her hair was sharp, her badge shined. But something had changed. The comments on her latest video had shifted. It wasn't the usual praise. They were starting to question her. This doesn't look right. Where's the full footage? Why didn't he get a ticket? Isn't this illegal? She brushed it off, told herself it was just noise. But there were too many to ignore. Her follower count was still growing, but engagement was dipping. The algorithm was smart. It sensed hesitation. Then the call came in. A teenage boy, 17, had been stopped outside a convenience store on the south side of town. One of her officers, Kevin Hartwell, claimed he fit the description of a theft suspect. No weapon, no charges. Just a public stop, drawn weapon, and a young man sobbing on the sidewalk. Standard procedure, maybe. But it was recorded, not by Hartwell, but by the boy's mother, Jasmine Crawford, who arrived just minutes into the encounter. And Jasmine wasn't just any local mom. She was a journalist, formerly a producer in Memphis. She'd moved back to Millbrook Valley to care for her aging parents. Quiet, steady, but sharp. And when she posted the video to her personal Facebook page with the caption, "My son is not a suspect. He's a student walking home from school," it went viral in a very different way. By evening, it had 750,000 views. Victoria's name wasn't in the clip. She wasn't even on the scene. But in the comments, she was everywhere. Where's Rensfield now? She taught them this. This is what her training looks like. Jasmine was already being interviewed by a local podcast. She mentioned a pattern. She mentioned Damon Blackridge. Victoria heard the name and froze. She turned off her screen. Suddenly, things that had once been background noise were now shouting in her ear. The sergeant's quiet glances. The lieutenant's tight tone. Even the receptionist's clipped smile. She walked through the station and noticed 2 officers huddled over a computer, whispering. The room fell silent when she passed. She went into her office, shut the door, and opened her internal dashboard. 6 body cam review requests. From outside agencies. One marked urgent. Another marked DOJ. That one made her chest tighten. She picked up her phone and called Officer Hartwell. "Don't say anything without me present," she said flatly. Not to press, not to IA, no one. He was quiet on the other end. Then, "Cap, you think this is about that guy from the gas station?" She didn't answer, just hung up. Her control was slipping, and fast. She pulled up Damon Blackridge's license again. Still clean. still unreadable. The more she thought about him, the more something gnawed at her. He hadn't acted like someone caught off guard. He'd acted like someone expecting that stop, like someone studying her. And now she was the one being studied. She checked the local paper's homepage. A blurry screenshot of her from one of her past traffic stop videos sat next to the headline. Pattern of profiling. Millbrook Valley PD under fire amid viral complaints. She slammed the laptop shut. There was still time to fix this, she told herself. If she just stayed visible, kept posting, kept smiling, people would forget. She'd spin it. Say the department was cooperating. Say the video was out of context. Say the media was twisting things. She just needed one good video. One win. Something bold. She grabbed her keys. If the public wanted transparency, she'd give it to them. She'd make another stop tonight. One that couldn't be misinterpreted. One that would put the doubt to rest. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have guessed, was that the FBI already had a surveillance team in town. Quiet, close, and watching every step she took. They didn't need to chase her. They knew her ego would bring her straight to them. By Monday morning, Millbrook Valley didn't feel like the same town. It wasn't just the news stories, though they were impossible to ignore. The Nashville Tennessean ran a headline that made its way into the grocery stores and barbershops by noon. Captain Rinsfield accused of targeting black residents amid viral videos. And just beneath the fold, a second story. Who is Damon Blackridge? That one had no photo, no background. Just speculation. People started asking questions. Not loudly at first, but in passing. At the diner, the lady at the register whispered to the cook, "Did you hear about that officer from the videos?" In church pews, glances passed when Victoria's name came up during the weekly prayer requests. On local talk radio, one of the usually pro-police hosts said, "If this is true, we got a real problem." At first, Victoria thought it would pass. She'd weathered criticism before, angry parents, civil complaints, a few protesters back in 2020 that barely lasted 2 days. This time, she figured it would blow over too. But the pressure wasn't just external. Inside the department, the mood had shifted. Officers were avoiding eye contact. Conversations stopped when she walked into the room. Someone had printed out a still frame from one of her videos and taped it to the back of the break room fridge with a sticky note that read, "Not everything needs to be content." Victoria ripped it down without a word. Then came the phone call from the mayor's office. The town's mayor, Harold Brennan, wasn't known for taking sides. A retired insurance broker, his priority had always been keeping Millbrook Valley quiet and business-friendly. But now, with 3 news trucks parked outside City Hall and national headlines mounting, he had no choice. He asked Victoria to come in, off the clock. She sat across from him in his office, legs crossed, arms stiff. "We need to issue a statement," he said. "I already did. I told local press the footage was being reviewed." "Not that kind of statement." She didn't speak. The mayor leaned forward. "Victoria, this isn't just internet drama anymore. You're a face now, not just of the department, of the town. And this town's getting hate mail." "I've done nothing wrong," she snapped. He nodded slowly. "Maybe. But perception matters more than ever. And the perception is that this department targets black residents for the sake of clicks." "You think I care about clicks?" The mayor didn't answer. He didn't have to. Victoria stood up. "I'm not stepping down. I'm not asking you to," he said. "Yet." She walked out, heart pounding. She didn't go back to the station. Instead, she drove aimlessly through town, past the gas station where she stopped Damon, past the school where she gave speeches, past the park where she once filmed a video handing out ice cream to kids during the summer. And everywhere, she saw the same thing, people watching her. Not waving, not smiling, just watching. Even her most loyal supporters were suddenly silent. No new shares, no likes, no reposts from the usual pages. That night, things got worse. The civil rights attorney who'd first reposted Damon's footage published a full breakdown, side-by-side comparisons of Victoria's edited clips and body cam records obtained through a FOIA request. The discrepancies weren't small. One clip had removed 21 seconds of dialogue where the subject asked, "Why are you arresting me?" Another had muted background audio that included another officer laughing about the stop. The attorney ended the post with a line that landed like a hammer. "This isn't community policing. This is theater." The post exploded. Mainstream outlets picked it up. National attention followed. And still, Damon stayed quiet. People were starting to ask why. Some claimed he was just a guy who got lucky with a good lawyer. Others said he worked in tech. A few suspected something deeper. But no one really knew. And that made people uneasy, because Damon wasn't playing the role they expected. He wasn't out marching, wasn't tweeting, wasn't appearing on podcasts. Victoria knew it had to end that night. Too much was slipping through her fingers, her reputation, her department's unity, the public's favor. If she let the momentum tilt any further, she wouldn't just lose her rank. She'd lose the entire narrative. And once the public rewrites your story, there's no getting it back. She couldn't allow that. So she decided to force the story into her own hands again. She called Officer Hartwell, who still owed her loyalty, barely, and told him to meet her at the old industrial complex on the east side. It was mostly vacant these days, just a few storage units and a concrete skeleton of a warehouse where teenagers sometimes hung out to smoke. Routine patrol, she said. We'll check on a few loitering complaints. Bring your vest. Leave your body cam off. Hartwell hesitated. That's against protocol. So is leaking footage to the press, she snapped. He didn't argue again. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the Bureau had bugged her phone 2 days ago. The minute she gave that location, a black SUV 3 blocks over flicked its headlights twice and started rolling. 2 agents followed in a separate vehicle, staying just out of sight. This wasn't improvisation anymore. It was containment. Damon had briefed them just that morning. He'd warned them. She's going to do something reckless. Watch for isolation, watch for setup. If she calls back up last minute or deviates from her patrol grid, be ready. They were ready. But Victoria still thought she was ahead. At 8:47 p.m., she pulled into the gravel lot behind the industrial complex. Hartwell was already there, leaning on the hood of his car. He looked nervous, rightfully so. What's the play, he asked. She tossed him a clipboard. I got a tip. Said that same guy from the gas station, Blackridge, has been hanging around here at night. No clear reason. Might be casing something. If he shows up, I want it documented. Quick and clean. Hartwell narrowed his eyes. You serious? I'm not planting anything, she snapped. We're just watching. If he runs, we follow. If he resists, we detain. Hartwell didn't speak for a moment. You sure this is smart? But she was already walking toward the back of the building. Across the street, parked beside a row of darkened storefronts, 2 agents in plain clothes adjusted their comms. One raised a small camera to the windshield. Another clicked the mic twice. Damon was already nearby. He wasn't wired tonight. He didn't need to be. He was watching from a second-story window of a neighboring building. Every move Victoria made was visible. Every step was being recorded. She'd wanted control. Now she was the center of a live case file. 9:12 p.m., Victoria positioned herself behind a rusted dumpster with a full view of the alley. She held her flashlight low, just under her belt line. Classic bait setup. She expected Damon to walk by, maybe approach the building like he was scoping it out. She figured she'd intercept him, ask questions, create tension. Enough to pull her GoPro off her vest and start filming. Except Damon didn't show. Instead, her radio crackled. Unit 3 to Captain Rensfield. You've got a code 15. Immediate request for location check. She frowned. Say again. The voice repeated. Dispatch has received an anonymous tip. Possible misconduct in progress at the industrial complex. Her stomach turned. Then came another voice, one she didn't recognize. Captain Rensfield, this is Special Agent Robert Valdez with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Please remain where you are. You are currently being monitored under an open federal inquiry. She stood frozen. Hartwell backed away slowly, hands raised. Across the street, the agent stepped out of the SUV. No guns drawn. Just calm, practiced authority. The next morning, Millbrook Valley woke to a different kind of silence. No new uploads, no filtered footage, no daily stay safe out there from Captain Victoria Rensfield. Just an eerie stillness over the town, like it knew something had snapped. At 6 a.m., a convoy of 3 unmarked vehicles rolled into the Millbrook Valley Police Department parking lot. The officers inside weren't local. They didn't speak to the dispatch desk or stop to chat. They carried sealed folders, wore plain suits, and moved with quiet authority. The warrant had been signed overnight. Inside her office, Victoria sat motionless. She hadn't gone home. She hadn't even moved from her desk since the night before. Her gun and badge sat on the edge of the table, untouched. Her phone had stopped buzzing around 3 a.m. It seemed the press, the trolls, and even her followers had finally gotten bored. Or worse, convinced. She'd replayed the FBI's approach in her head again and again. The words still echoed. You are no longer in control of this narrative. She had built her career around the opposite. Every arrest she filmed, every clip she posted, it had all been about maintaining control, telling the story before anyone else could. Now the story had written itself, and it was out of her hands. At 7:04 a.m., the door opened. Agent Robert Valdez walked in with a calm face and a sealed folder in his hand. Captain Rensfield, he said, we're serving a federal arrest warrant. You're being charged with obstruction of justice, falsification of public records, and deprivation of civil rights under color of law. Victoria didn't argue. She didn't stand. Just looked at the folder, then at him. You planned this, she said. Valdez nodded once. You planned it for us. She gave a tired laugh. And what about him? The one I stopped. Damon Blackridge is a federal agent. His assignment here is complete. She stared for a long moment, the realization settling in. It hadn't been an accident. She had been the target from the moment he stepped foot in Millbrook Valley. Damon hadn't just been observing. He'd been waiting for her to make a move. And she did. Valdez read her rights, slow and clear. When it was over, she stood, placed her hands behind her back, and let him cuff her. Outside, officers who once admired her watched silently from the windows. Some looked away. Others didn't blink. One of the younger recruits shifted uncomfortably, like watching the ending of a story he thought would go differently. As Victoria was led out the front door, a local reporter tried to get a quote. Captain Rensfield, any comment? She didn't speak. But behind her, someone else stepped into view. Damon. He stood beside Agent Valdez for a moment. Not as a suspect, not even as a witness, but as the one person who had seen it all start to finish. His presence alone answered more questions than any press conference could. The reporter turned her camera to him. Sir, are you willing to comment on what happened here? He paused, then said simply, the truth speaks louder than edits. That was all. By noon, the footage of Victoria being let out in cuffs had gone viral. This time, she was the one being recorded. No background music, no dramatic filters. Just the raw sound of footsteps on concrete and the tight zip of handcuffs locking in place. Public reaction was mixed at first. Some diehard supporters claimed it was political, that she'd been set up, that good cops get punished now. But the evidence was too strong. The timeline's too precise. The voiceovers she used didn't line up with her body cam footage. And the teen she tried to paint as aggressive had been praying quietly in the back seat of his mom's car the whole time. It all came out. The forced searches, the false reports, the pre-filmed arrest setups. Even the internal complaints she had suppressed were dug up and made public. By the end of the week, the department's website had a new interim captain. Victoria's name was scrubbed. Her personal pages deleted. Her legacy erased. Not by haters or trolls, but by her own obsession with being seen. But this story wasn't just about her. At a small town hall meeting days later, a group of residents met to talk about reform. Among them was Damon, seated quietly in the back, listening. When someone asked if he had anything to say, he stood briefly and said, sometimes justice doesn't make noise. It just makes things right. Weeks passed, and the dust that once hovered over Millbrook Valley slowly began to settle. But the silence that followed wasn't the same as before. It was heavier, more honest. The kind of quiet that comes after something real, something raw has been exposed. Victoria Rensfield sat in a federal holding facility outside Nashville. Her trial date hadn't been announced, but her charges had grown. The Justice Department added 2 more counts of civil rights violations and a conspiracy charge tied to her history of falsified reports. Her attorney, a mid-tier defense lawyer from Memphis, was already floating the idea of a plea deal, but she refused to consider it. In her mind, she wasn't corrupt. She was misunderstood. Misguided, maybe. A little too ambitious. But not criminal. The public didn't agree. Public opinion had turned, not because of one bad video or one high-profile arrest, but because patterns don't lie. When enough threads are pulled, the whole picture starts to show. In her case, It showed a career built on image over integrity, a digital presence crafted to distract from a crumbling core. The department, reeling from the scandal, was placed under temporary oversight by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Officers now wore new body cams with auto-upload systems. Internal reports were double-audited. And for the first time in years, Millbrook Valley PD held public listening sessions. Uncomfortable, emotional, and absolutely necessary. And Damon? He was gone. Just like that. No farewell party, no press appearance, no badge ceremony. One morning, his apartment was empty. The only thing left behind was a note taped to the door that read, "Healing starts when truth is louder than fear." But his impact lingered, not just in policy or press, but in people. Jasmine Crawford, the mother who recorded her son's wrongful stop, launched a local watchdog initiative. She called it Citizens First. Within weeks, they had over 400 members, black, white, old, young, all committed to one thing: accountability. At the town's monthly council meeting, a teenager stood and read a statement into the record. He said he was one of the boys Victoria had stopped 2 years earlier. No ticket, no charge, just humiliation. He said he'd carried that moment for 2 years, thinking he was at fault. Then he saw Damon's story, saw the cracks in Victoria's act, and finally believed he hadn't done anything wrong. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It whispers. It shows up in small changes. A neighbor who used to say nothing now speaks up. A teacher who looks her students in the eye when she talks about fairness. A sheriff's deputy who rewrites how he trains his rookies. None of this made Millbrook Valley perfect. But perfection was never the goal. Truth was. And truth, when told clearly and early, doesn't need to go viral to matter. It just needs to be believed. There were still critics, of course. People who said Damon should have spoken out publicly, should have stayed and faced the community. But they missed the point. He was never the story. He was the mirror. And what Victoria Rensfield saw in that mirror the night she tried to script one more arrest, what she tried to hide behind edits and captions, was the part of herself she never thought would be judged. In the end, she was wrong about that too.